Hi there guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be giving you my top tips to pass the IELTS English exam. If you're considering a visa to Australia and you have to pass one of those pesky English exams, then today I'm going to be giving you my top tips to pass the IELTS English exam. My name's Ross and recently I emigrated with my family to Australia to start a new life abroad. In this video I'm going to be sharing with you how I scored on the IELTS English exam and what I did to achieve that. I'm going to be going through exactly what is in the exam and what you can expect from it, and also 5 of my tips that I think will help you to pass. As an added bonus as well, I'm going to go through what I would consider as a teacher are the common mistakes when people try and do exams. If you've not sat the exam yet, or you're having to go through it again and again because you're not quite getting the score that you want, hopefully this video will help you to achieve your goals with the IELTS exam. Before we start, a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm a teacher, but I'm not really like an English language IELTS teacher, although I do actually teach English now. I've got no affiliation really to the IELTS, and this video is just me sharing my experiences with the hope that you can gain a better insight. Exams do change from time to time, and depending on when you're seeing this video, I definitely would still recommend looking at the IELTS website and just checking that all of the information on this is correct. If you want any further information on any updates, I'll put a link down to the IELTS website in the description below. So first off, what did I actually score? Well, for my visa and my profession, my visa is a 189 skilled independent visa, which grants us permanent residency in Australia. I'm a teacher, which means that I'm on the skills list, but surprisingly, I only had to do the general IELTS English exam and not the academic one, which apart from being a dent to my ego, was a right touch because I didn't have to do the harder exam. To my knowledge, the academic exam, I think, is for nurses and people that are obviously a lot smarter than me. If you're looking at coming over to do some teaching, or perhaps if you're a tradie, then you only really have to do the general exam, which realistically is hard enough and I wouldn't want to do one harder. Now on my first go, I managed to score an 8.5 out of 9, which granted me with the full 20 points that I needed for my visa as a standard of superior English. Superior. I don't really know what's superior about my English. In order to achieve a superior score, you need to get a score of at least 8, and in order to qualify for 10 points, I believe you've got to get over 7 points. And in order to get 10 points, I believe you've got to score over 6. I completed mine in May 2018, and at the time that I'm making this video, everything seems to be exactly the same as when I did it. So what's actually in the exam? The exam is broken down into 4 different parts of listening, reading, writing, and speaking. For any of you that ever did GCSE languages, it seems a little bit the same, but it's actually really different. Now all of these tests themselves, they're all back to back. You don't get a toilet break. They make you go to the toilet beforehand, so don't drink too much water, otherwise you're gonna be busting. And the whole thing takes 2 hours and 45 minutes. Yep, you heard me right. They don't let you go to the toilet. It's a farce. They don't let you go to the toilet. They really take cheating and any chance that you could be cheating really seriously. The listening part takes up 30 minutes and is made up of 4 different monologues or dialogues pre-recorded. These are all conversational based, they're on different topics, and as they go through from the first one to the 4th one, they do get progressively more difficult. As you're listening to the test, you also need to be answering all of the questions that are coming up. So you have to answer the questions as you go along, and these can be made up of multiple guess, matching, labeling, form completion, sentence completion, and you might even have to give some short answers as well. There are 40 questions in total, and generally they're quite quick and easy to complete, but there are a lot of them and you have to make sure you get through them quickly. The recordings start from quite an easy general conversation between maybe 2 people through to monologues given by 1 or 2 people. Then you might have conversations with up to 4 different people in them. And then lastly, there's some kind of more academic style monologue. The reading exam is slightly longer at 60 minutes, and this is 3 workplace texts that could come from books, magazines, or even journals. Again, this one has 40 questions and they're all based upon reading comprehension. In this case, you might get multiple choice answers like true, false, or not given. You might have to match information or headings or subheadings. You might have to label things, and again you might have to give short answers and maybe even summaries. The writing exam is also 60 minutes long, and this is broken into 2 separate tasks. Task 1, they recommend that you spend about 20 minutes doing. This is where you're given a certain situation and you're expected to write a letter about that situation, explaining more about it. You can give your answer in either personal, semi-professional, or professional tone. It doesn't really matter. When I did the test, the situation was responding to an email, and I think I was supposed to be recommending a book that I had read recently to a colleague. I just made up some stuff about some academic book that I'd read about teaching. I hadn't actually read it. I don't even think it was a book. I think I might have been pretending a TV show was a book that I had read. For the second task, you're supposed to spend a bit longer, so this is the 40 minutes out of your 60 minutes in total. This one is supposed to be sort of an essay style format, where you're supposed to express a point of view in relation to an argument or a problem. This one again can either be personal or professional in style, depending on what you want. For this one, I remember again, and they were asking the question about speed limits and whether or not speed limits should be raised or lowered in pedestrian areas. But I do remember, I think I tried to give a bit of a balanced argument, a bit of an argument for, a bit of an argument against, with some kind of conclusion that I made up on the day. After each stage, the examiners stop you, and then they're collecting your test papers for that part of the exam. They're really strict on timings, so if it's 45 minutes or 60 minutes, when the timing stops, you better put your pen or pencil down, because they will literally fail you on the spot. That is the quickest I have ever seen someone stop writing. To be honest, in my opinion, you have more than enough time as long as you're well prepared for the exam. Then after that, you can have a little bit of a break. You can obviously go to the toilet, and you're pretty busting because you've not had one for about 3 hours. And the last part is your speaking exam, which takes between 11 and 14 minutes. The first stage is just general questions about you and other familiar topics, and this takes between 4 and 5 minutes. For the last 2 stages, you're given a card on a particular topic, and you've got 1 minute to prepare something to talk about it, and you can even take notes if you want to. After you've had your minute to prepare, you're expected to talk about this topic for about 2 minutes. And afterwards, the examiner will ask you 1 or 2 simple questions about what you've just said, just to confirm your understanding. And for the third and final stage, you are asked some more detailed questions about that topic, so it's kind of like an extension on from that. But these questions are open-ended, and they're designed to allow a little bit more of a discussion, or perhaps some more abstract ideas that you might have about that topic. They give you about 4 or 5 minutes for this stage, which is plenty of time to be able to justify some of the opinions that you might have about that topic. Now, to be honest, I can't really remember exactly what the topic that I had was, but it wasn't anything too weird or difficult to understand, and it was something pretty general, not like something that you'd see in the news or anything like that. So in my experience, what tips would I have for anyone that was going to do the IELTS exam and get a good score in the future? Tip number 1. Do the practice materials. There are plenty of practice materials around. For me, I was actually provided some by my visa agent, but you can also go on the IELTS website, and there are plenty of sample answers, model answers, and just general questions that you could expect in the exam. Depending on which section of the exam that you're worried about, whether it's the listening, reading, writing, or speaking, you can have a look at some of the practice questions and sample answers to get you used to what is expected of you from the exam. I definitely recommend doing this and not going in without understanding what's expected of you and then being surprised when you don't do what you're supposed to do. If you're that worried, you can even memorize some of the sample answers, and if they ask you something similar, you can provide that for your writing or your speaking exam. Tip number 2, remember this is a test, and you need to show off as much of your English knowledge as you can. Now, unfortunately, that does come down to also things like handwriting, but just make sure that it's as legible as you can make it be. Check for spelling, punctuation, grammar, and any fancy vocabulary that you might have. Oh my God, I really sound like a teacher when I say that. And when it comes to your writing exam and your speaking exam, really try to say as much as possible. For the writing exam, try and make sure that you fill up the full word limit. And to be honest, if you go a little bit over, that's not really going to be a problem either. And when it comes to your speaking exam, the examiner is instructed to stop you and move on to the next part if there are any big or significant gaps. You're allowed to pause, you're allowed to take a breath, but try and say something else extra, otherwise that will be the end of the question for you. I found that 60 minutes for both the reading and the writing was ample time for me to go back and check through my answers. When it comes to the listening exam, you are really kind of doing that one on the fly, so you can't really go back and check. The same with the speaking, you're kind of on your own, but do make sure you keep talking. Check for pronunciation. I'm originally from Kent. I'm told I have a specific style of accent, but when it comes to trying to speak properly, I suppose one must always speak a little bit like the Queen. To be honest, I didn't turn it on that much, but I was conscious of the things that I was saying. It's not like I was trying to get rid of my accent, but I was trying to make sure that I was pronouncing things properly when it was in the speaking exam. I actually got this tip from the examiner, who before we started, he gave me a little brief, and he just said to me, remember, this is an exam. If you've got a really thick accent, or your accent is really broad, whilst I'm not saying don't be proud of where you come from, just be aware that the exam is trying to assess the English of a broad range of different people, and that you need to be understood by all of them. Keep your accent, but make sure that they understand what you're saying. Tip number 3, the listening exam is actually a comprehension exam. When I first went into the listening exam, I was treating it a bit like GCSE French, and I was listening out for certain words that I had seen when I pre-scanned through the questions. To be honest, I don't think I heard any of the specific words that I was listening out for when I read them on the question on the sheet. To get round this before you start, you need to pre-read through all of the questions and check for the types of things that you might be looking for. Also, as it went through, it helped if I kept a finger roughly on what question I was on, because I found that all of the questions came in chronological order, and if I wasn't sure about a question, I could perhaps leave a little note and move on to the next one and try and come back to it afterwards. It all goes through really quickly, and if you start to get flustered about exactly where you are on the exam, then chances are you're going to stuff it up. They also throw in some regional accents into there, so I remember hearing a bit of Geordie, a bit of Scottish, a bit of Welsh, a bit of Scouse, so make sure that you can understand people from different parts of the UK as well. They also use some slang, so you might not be hearing the exact proper English word, and you're expected to understand the colloquial slang as well. To be honest, I found the listening exam the hardest one, which is why I've given a tip all on its own, and I definitely would recommend looking at some practice materials and going through it beforehand, just so that you know what to expect. Tip number 4, get some rest. I know it sounds stupid, but the amount of people that don't take it seriously, perhaps are panicking, and don't give themselves the appropriate amount of rest, eat properly, drink properly beforehand, you really are setting yourself up to fail. I say the same thing to all of my kids before they're doing exams. If you're not properly prepared and you haven't taken care of your body either, it's a bit like sport. You can't expect yourself to be on top form. You're in the exam hall for nearly 3 hours, and it is going to take a toll on your body. If you've not eaten properly beforehand, had a decent breakfast, had a coffee, then you are going to start to struggle after 1 or 2 or nearly 3 hours in the hall. In all of the exams that I've ever done at school or for teaching, I've never sat in a hall for 3 hours, except when I did my IELTS English exam. Based upon timings alone, that has to be the hardest exam I've ever done. And tip number 5, use what you know. With all the preparation and planning that you can do, you might even have some pre-prepared answers. To be honest, you can't account for exactly what questions are going to be asked on the day. You're not marked on your opinions, although I would say don't be too crazy with your thoughts and ideas. Do try and use information that is readily available to you. Like I said earlier, I wrote an email about a book that wasn't actually a book, and I just based it upon a TV show I'd seen a few days before. They can't mark you down for the content, but they will mark you down for the way that you write it. And if you're sat there trying to worry about exactly what you want to talk about or what you want to write about, you're going to start to get flustered in the delivery of what it is that you're trying to do. Adapt your answers to your own strengths, bring it all back to your level, and make sure that you're comfortable with the things that you are going to talk or write about, and don't worry about getting too creative. And lastly, we're going to go through some common mistakes or things that I think people do wrong when coming up to the IELTS exam, or any exam for that matter. Firstly, think about your vocabulary. Don't use short words, and when you're checking back through your answers, could you have used something that's a little bit more fancy? Don't repeat phrases just to fill up lines. If you're worried about the word count for your writing exam, or even if you're one of these people that has phrases that you repeat when you talk to people, just be conscious of that and try and think of either something else to say or not being one of those people that repeats things. I know I say actually a lot, and I know I really shouldn't do it in an exam. For the listening part, don't nod or give no answers. They can't see it. So make sure that you're very vocal with your answers and don't rely on hands or eyes or head motions. And when it comes to your writing exam or your speaking exam, it also pays to sit on the fence. Don't be really polarized with your opinions or your answers. Try and pose your answers in a pros and cons kind of fashion. That way it'll give you more to talk about. When you're writing, don't change your pronouns. Just stick with I. Don't leave blank answers. Give everything a go, and give everything a go to the best of your ability. Wear some comfy clothes. It's not a job interview. I saw some people in some quite fancy stuff and I was wondering where they were going afterwards. You're in there for 3 hours, make sure you're comfy. Bring lots of pens, pencils, erasers, have a little pencil case ready with you, because genuinely if your pen runs out, they don't give you anything else. On that note, scratch that, you can't bring a pencil case in, you literally can't bring anything into the exam. No phones, no watches, anything that they think you could be cheating with, you're not allowed to bring into the exam hall. So it's literally just pens and pencils and a rubber. Make sure you've got your correct ID. They check you before you go into the exam hall, whether that's your driving license, your passport, or whatever they're asking you for, make sure you bring it. The last thing you want to do is turn up and not have the right ID. Remember the timings for your writing exam are 20 minutes for the first bit and 40 minutes for the second bit. give yourself a little bit of a practice and don't spend too long on one or the other. Also, before you start writing for those writing exams, maybe do a little bit of a plan just so that you know roughly what structure that is that you're going to follow. Even if it just calms your nerves, keeps you on track, makes you stick to timings, it's going to be worth it. Don't keep practicing your strengths. Focus on your weaknesses. If your weaknesses is with your accent, make sure you're trying to talk properly. If your weakness is with your writing or your listening, make sure you're practicing those on the IELTS website or any other resources that you can get hold of. And that's it. That's my experience. Those are my tips. I hope that this video can help you to go and score an 8.5 on your IELTS exam as well. It's a tricky exam, but it is one that can be beaten. If you found this video useful, make sure to give us a like, or if you've got any further questions that you want to ask me about the exam or about our move to Australia, make sure you put them down into the comment section below, and I love trying to respond wherever I can. And if you're interested about our immigration journey and moving across to Australia, please check out our channel, have a look at some of the other videos, and if it's something you're into, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, good luck on your exam, and I'll see you next time.